Welcome back to Kendrick and Dusty Talk Sports. We still waiting on the GoFundMe to kick in for our open and a graphic, but it's coming though.
It's dusk. It's dusk.
We've talked to some people, so apparently it's on its way. As you can see, we are joined now by Jeff Lightsey. He got the interview that everybody's talking about around town with Trentyn Flowers. First of all, Jeff, welcome back. For those who don't know, Jeff actually interned under us, 7 years ago?
Yeah, back in 2016. Yeah, summer of 16.
Wow, you're getting old.
And he can't stay away.
I am. too old.
So you left here, you worked at WBKO for a while, and now you're running your website?
Yeah, so freelancing, do website, podcast, and then we have a radio show on 93.9 on Saturdays. So yeah, just in the mix, just kind of in the mix everywhere, and sometimes you get lucky and stuff like this happens in the middle of August, so I don't know.
Right, and we'll get right to it. First off, of course, the interview everyone's talking about with Trentyn Flowers. Yeah, go ahead and click that. This is when you got him. And first of all, just talk about how did all of this come about? Because all of us have seen Trentyn around, but we hadn't had a chance to talk to him. As a matter of fact, he he read to some kids at a book thing earlier this summer, but we weren't allowed to talk to the players. So how did all this come about for you?
Yeah, so Trentyn, as you know, decided he was going to go to Australia, and there was a lot of stuff flying around about the reason why he's going to Australia. He was getting killed in practice. He wanted NIL and NBL money. He wanted everything, right? So I was just interested, and I saw that Trentyn was doing stories with national publications, Paul being Cardi, 247. And so all I did was just reach out. I just hit Trentyn and his mom, and I was like, hey.
As simple as that.
Yeah. And I was like, hey. And I specifically asked for him and his dad because him and his dad were both in a lot of perspectives, getting a bad rap. So I was just like, hey, if you guys want to come on and talk to me about defending yourselves or, your side of the story. And they were like, absolutely. And we got it done the same day. It all happened all in one day. We dropped the snippet last night, dropped the whole thing today. And then, the rest is history.
And
Vegas is what they say.
You laid it out. I mean, you hashed it out and you made it very clear at the start that there were rumors and there were a lot of people talking, and they seemed pretty receptive. Yeah. Is that kind of how you felt during this entire interview process?
No, yeah, man, they were awesome. I mean, they like I said, whether you believe what they said or not is up to you. All I had to do was ask the questions. I wasn't
just a message,
and I wasn't there to be Barbara Walters. I wasn't going to grill them, right? I just wanted to hear what they had to say about what went down with the whole ordeal, because this is. This is unordinary, right? To a guy to leave a week before school starts. Sure, right. We see guys leave all the time, but typically it'd be late if it was July.
Right.
You know what I mean? It'd be late if it's July. But literally 2 weeks, a week before school, a week before classes, 2 days before you have to be enrolled, all of that is abnormal. So I just had to ask, how did this all come about? And they told their side of the story, and this is what kind of went wild, and people feel how they feel about it.
And because this was crazy to me is that we have video of him. He was out, because when Matt McGavish came on with me earlier in the week, we talked about if he were a kid that was quiet and on the low or whatever, you didn't really see him at much. You wouldn't be as surprised, but he was really involved in the community, and so. It's so weird that somebody who's already involved himself, dove into the community, just leaves like that.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what him and his dad was getting at, saying that this wasn't calculated. Right? Because Trentyn has held an event. He's been to every event. Right. Any event that had anything to do in the city of Louisville, whether it was TBT, the homies Jack Harlow kickball game, this man was everywhere. Right. All over, you showed reading to children in the city. He was everywhere. And then as they laid it out, he wanted to be here. And if it was any college that he was going to play for, it was going to be Louisville. It's just that this opportunity presented itself. And one thing they really harped on was the fact that this Australian team will allow him to play point guard. This is the big point guard. But they were serious about it. And one thing they did was compare him to previous point guards that played in this league. LaMelo Ball, Josh Giddey, RJ Hampton. These are guys that they feel like are built the same way as Trentyn, has the same type of game, and that will translate to the same type of success. Josh Giddey went number 6 in the draft. LaMelo Ball went number 3 in the draft. They think Trentyn's that potential, and so they wanted to expose it at that level to get in front of NBA scouts and be a professional.
Before we get into the actual sound bites of what he said too, because we got some of those here for you. When you look at kind of overall the overarching theme of this interview, at least it seemed from, I think, multiple perspectives, that they weren't coming out as necessarily defensive, but that they were coming out saying that this was the opportunity. As you mentioned, there was kind of an opportunity for them that they couldn't pass up. And it seemed like that was kind of the repetitive overarching theme more than anything else from this interview.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest takeaways. I guess the biggest takeaway is they hadn't talked to coach yet. You're leaving the team, you've never talked to the head coach. That was, I think, was the biggest takeaway. But the thing was, like, there was no ill will, at least not publicly, right? It was just like, hey, this opportunity presented itself. These guys have been a pro, and this team wants him to fill this position that they felt he wouldn't get a chance to do here at Louisville.
From their perspective,
yes.
Of course.
Exactly.
Yeah, but they said, well, let's just hear from Trentyn himself on why he's leaving.
I mean, this was the opportunity of a lifetime for me. I feel like there was only certain type of window I got to make this decision, and that window was narrow. And this was something down the line I didn't want to walk out my life and be like, man, I wish I should have took that opportunity, or, just to have regretted this decision. So, I'm going over there. It's a pro-style game. I'm playing against a more physical, older grown men, which is really the NBA. And, I just get time to develop and focus on my game and, just better myself as a person.
So again, like he said, it's an opportunity he says he couldn't pass up.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much the cut and dry. Like, it's like, hey, and I think the whole guard thing was a big thing. Just this whole recruiting class with Kenny Payne and we don't have enough guards. We don't have enough guards. Well, none of us up until recently didn't know how much of a point guard Trentyn Flowers really, and his father really believed that he is. They went on to say that he had a growth spurt his junior year, sophomore year of high school.
Right.
And so before then, he was exclusively a point guard. And he almost is offended that people call him a 2 or 3.
Right.
And that's why I was like, oh, this is the first I've ever heard this. He's like, yeah, man, I'm a PG, and I'm going to show you guys that I'm a PG over in Australia, and I wouldn't have got that chance here in Louisville the way that I feel like I should.
Because I remember earlier in the offseason, I'm thinking he had already signed, of course. And I remember, I think it was him, pretty sure it was him and his mom came out on Twitter saying he is a point guard. And because a lot of the fans are, how fans have been.
I think they would never say point guard. They would always say guard, because the whole thing, fans, because especially with last year's debacle, they were like, oh, we don't have enough guards. We don't have enough guards. And him and his mom would be like, no, Trentyn is a guard.
Right.
Trentyn, they would never put the point guard in front of, but it's all one and the same. And they would be like, yo, he's a guard. He's a guard. And they very much emphasized it. And now him and his dad are saying not only is he a guard, he's a point guard. And as we know, Kenny Payne and his staff has made it evident. Sky's the starting PG for this start. I mean, for the 2023 season. Trentyn and them, I guess, wasn't the biggest fan of that.
Well, and when you look at kind of some of the comments that he made, I mean, verbatim, he said, if this opportunity came any closer to the season, I wouldn't have done it. So, you're talking about timing here, and he spoke even a little more on that as well. So here's kind of some of the insight that he gave us about the reason and timing why this actually happened.
Well, first of all, this is an opportunity just recently presented itself. So, you contrary to proper belief, this was never in the works. It's never the plan. If you had asked us a few days ago, we wouldn't have, this was just been fresh for us. So, as far as timing, we're on God's time. And I think a lot of times people wonder why, if you move or you do something like that, but we're believers. We believe that anything that God puts in front of us, it's there for a reason. And so I don't think there's any perfect time. I mean, you probably have wife, kids, whatever else. There was no perfect time. Everybody's saying timing. There's, I've never experienced a perfect time in my life, but I do know that God's is perfect timing with whatever he puts in front of you. So
now also I want to add on to that. Like, one thing is, if this opportunity that came any time close to the season, I would have never made this decision. But, we're 3 months out. Louisville still has the time to do whatever they need to do on their end. And we was respectful of everybody else's time.
So that was a lot of dad talking as well.
I was going to say, you asked Trentyn the question, but Dad answered it. And there was another one later on that we were talking about in the office that cracked me up because Dad's a talker.
Yeah.
And he talks a long time in one of the bites. And then at the end of it says, but Trentyn can talk for himself. Yeah. He's like, yeah, we like to hear from him.
we heard a lot of the quotes of God's timing. We heard they mentioned 3 months out. That gives Louisville time to make an adjustment. I don't know.
I don't know if that works. That's not how it works.
It's not quite exactly the insight that I think that the coaches would want to hear. But I think you had kind of mentioned the overarching other theme, if you will, was the fact that they hadn't communicated with Coach Payne, and that there were 7 to 8 phone calls, according to Trentyn, that weren't answered. And I guess from your perspective from this interview, did it seem like that was kind of a hard answer to truly get across from them? Or because you did a pretty good job at kind of just sitting and letting them answer it accordingly too.
No, I didn't even ask that directly. All I said was, when did you guys talk to the staff? Like how much sooner did the staff know you were leaving as opposed to us? We all found out on Monday, but did the staff find out on Monday? Right. Well, it seemed like they knew a little bit ahead of time because say if Trentyn dropped the post at like 3:00, U of L put out something like 3:05. Right. So that means they knew ahead of time. I didn't know how much. And he went on to tell me the story about how he wanted to meet them face to face. And it sounds like I didn't really dig in, but he met with Nolan. He made that clear. He met with Nolan Smith, that they have their best relationships with Nolan Smith.
Who recruited him?
Yes, he recruited him for years. Recruited him originally at Duke and then over here to Louisville. And they made that clear too. Met Nolan face to face, let him know their piece. And it sounds like they wanted to do the same thing with Kenny. And Kenny just did. Kenny really wasn't feeling it. He really wasn't feeling it, and I can to a certain extent I can understand. It's like, hey, we essentially, you're the crown jewel of our recruiting class, and 2 days before I can get because they say 3 months, but it's really only you have to be enrolled in class to play this year, and 2 days before I can enroll a kid in class. You dip. It's like, okay, that's a bit much. So I can see how Kenny feels a certain kind of way.
Right. And I guess in their defense, maybe they did not realize that's how it works. Absolutely. I mean, it's very possible that that's how that works. And real quick, if you want to get involved in the show, just send us a message on Facebook. You can just reach out if you have a question you want us to ask Jeff. Dusty's good buddy, Alan McNair, is reached out and said hello.
Good to see you too, Alan. Appreciate you reaching out. And
Jason Bowles has a comment, God's time is about money, after listening to that comment. But I mean, I don't want to put words in their mouth. And to be honest with you, I'm happy to see Trentyn's father being so involved. Yeah. And obviously he cares about his kid. He loves his kid. He's out there and he's doing whatever he can for his child. I think he said he played basketball overseas at one point in his career. And I don't know. I would have liked to hear from Trentyn more, to be honest with you. Yeah. Dad was a little bit too talkative on there, to be honest with you. But I mean, Alan's appreciates the shout out. But going forward from what you've seen with U of L, what do you think is next for them? I mean, like I said, I don't think they can fill that roster spot for this season.
No, I think their roster is set. I mean, I think their mindset their roster was set, whether it was, 4 days ago, they thought it was one way. Now it's a little different, but I think that it is what it is. I think the loss of Trentyn it's going to matter. Like we can't act like he just is just a scrub. Right. This dude was highly talented, and this
can't replace it overnight.
Yeah, this team over in Australia wanted him for a reason. Yeah. So it's like he's a talented player now. Was he as talented as we think? I guess we'll never know. He's not going to lace it up here. Yeah. But there's still no excuses because the pressure's still on Coach KP. Yeah. When you come off a 4-win season, I mean, it just is what it is, whether kids bailing you at the last minute or not. So it's going to be interesting to see how if he ever addresses this, because this will be asked.
It'll be asked.
And he's not a media favorite.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not a fan of the media, or he's not crazy about talking. So the first chance someone gets to talk to him, they're going to ask him about this.
It's going to be the
I'm
first
interested
question
to see how he responds to it, because this is his team. He said he's been locked in all summer. That's why he didn't do much press. And now we'll see with some of these other guys who may have, only got 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes when they get 10, 12, 15. Now we've lost Trentyn Flowers.
One question that I really liked that you asked him, and it was towards the end of the podcast, you asked him how good he expects U of L to be now because of his loss. And, one thing I kind of noticed was a slight hesitation from him. And it was just a subtle hesitation. And he said, me leaving, it has an impact. But then he followed by saying Louisville basketball will be just fine. And I believe Louisville basketball will have a great season this year. So I guess from, kind of piggybacking off of that, did it feel like he maybe had a little bit of a reservation knowing, at least just from the tone, that this is going to be impactful for this squad this year?
Oh, no, he made it clear. I was the best player on the team, at least in his mind.
Right.
And losing me is a big deal. He made no bones about it. He was like, it ain't like we just lost Jeff.
Yeah.
He lost Trentyn Flowers. It's like, okay, I get it.
We can't lose Jeff.
Yeah,
though. We can't lose Jeff.
No. So he's like, but he still does believe that there's plenty of talent on the team.
Yeah.
Now he doesn't think. I mean, like he said, he think they'll have a good season, but he understands that, at least he's portraying that losing him is a big deal. What that means for the team upcoming, I guess we just have to wait and see.
Yeah. So, and looking at it from the fans' perspective, when it first happened, of course, Kenny Payne was catching all of it.
Yes.
After your interview, it felt like the tide kind of shifted.
So. I think so. I think people, because of the involvement of the dad, however you perceive that, and some of the answers that were given, whether you believe they were vague or very broad or whatever. And still not really narrowing down on who contacted who first.
Yeah, they never answered that question. You asked them specifically.
And I think with that, people are now kind of, and the fact that, Kenny is still the coach and people still want us to be good. They still, even though some people may give him a hard time, they still want this to be a good program, a good basketball team. And since he's no longer a part of it, it's like, all right, we can say whatever we want about him. Right. And so that's the way I think it has shifted some. And people, feel however they feel about them. And that's why I didn't want to insert myself too much, because I let them paint the narrative. Now, if they would have came out and said things differently, maybe people still would have been on KP.
Right.
But the way that they said it, people, like you said, have kind of changed their tone on how they feel about Kenny and how he's handled the situation.
From actual responses that you've seen from this podcast, and just in general from the public, I mean, what has kind of that reaction been that you've seen on Twitter, or any sort of response to your specific podcast?
I think it's exactly what Kendrick is saying. I think people are softening their blow on Coach Kenny Payne and kind of turned up a little bit on Trentyn Flowers. I think also too that people are understanding why he wouldn't answer. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, I'm because you got to think. I get it because I didn't say this during the things. Once again, I let them tell their story. Right. But in my opinion, if you're going to leave a team, right, and the head coach should be your first call.
Right.
I get it. Nolan is the guy that you have this deep relationship with. He's the guy that recruited you. He's the reason. The dad said it specifically. The only reason why we even know about Louisville is because of Nolan Smith.
Right.
And I get all of that. But your first call's got to be Kenny. Even if it's meeting with them together, you've got to call the head coach first, because he is the leader of the team. He is the top dog. He is the one you're actually playing for, not necessarily Nolan Smith as the leader of this program. So that's why. And people kind of feel that same way. That's why they're like, yo, if he did me like that, I wouldn't answer his call either. You know what I mean? Like, the message has been sent. Right. You didn't call me. You hit Nolan first. You met with him. And you decided to leave in the middle of August. We good.
3 months early.
We good.
Right. So since Monday, and since you dropped the interview, everything, what's life been like for you? Like, we have you here today, and I know you've done a ton of radio interviews since then.
Yeah, so we're Louisville Sports Live here today. These clips have been played on every news station, every radio station, at least sports and news station in Louisville. So the phone's been blowing up a little bit. But we'll see where it takes us from here. But it has been fun. It's been a lot of fun. When you get to break stories like this, it's pretty cool,
right?
Especially when you do it on accident. I mean, I really didn't mean to. It wasn't trying to. I got it. No, it was just kind of like, hey, Trentyn, people kind of bad mouthing you. How do you feel? It's like, well, I got a lot to say. Yeah. It's like, oh, your dad got something to say too. It's like, yeah, he does too. Well, come on out, man. Hey, can you do it late at night? Sure, why not? I'll be up. Right. So we've done it since then, and we'll see if anything else spurs from it. Who knows? But it may just be a story that's kind of like, hey, we're on top of it now. But it's Louisville. Something's always happening. Right. It's something always.
I told because he's he's new.
Yeah. We just met at one of the first basketball press conferences.
So I told him, he was like, I can't believe this happened. And I was like, at this point, I'm not surprised at anything that happens at the university.
It's U of L, the Reds. I've learned my lesson. I'm going to learn the lesson of the Bengals probably pretty soon. But
another great interview that you got that got overshadowed by this because you talked to Sydney Curry.
Yeah.
So how did that go?
So Sid, what I was doing, I was reacting to Trentyn on Instagram Live. I was reacting to Trentyn leaving, and it was just like, yo, it's so crazy. Trentyn's leaving. What is happening? There's still a bunch of questions. And then Sydney saw it and asked to join the live. So he asked to join the live. And so I was like, yo, what are your thoughts on Trentyn? He gave his thoughts. And I was like, well, okay, since we got you here, what was your thoughts on last year? He gave his opinion on last year. I asked him about being in and out of shape. He actually spoke about the strength and conditioning from the previous regime as to this regime and how it affected him. And that was insight. It was like, okay, now that also...
Was it more stringent or...
He said the strength and conditioning with the last regime was better for him. It's essentially what he said. It was better for him, and his body looked different between the two, and that's why I was like, okay. But he made no excuses. And one thing that I asked him specifically, because a lot of people say Coach Kenny Payne has criticized last players, has criticized their families. There's all these things. So I asked Sydney, like, yo, do you feel that way? Like, do you feel like it's like, man, I love Kenny. Like Kenny, y'all got to stick with KP. I understand. We tried. He's like, it wasn't like we didn't try. We tried to play. Like we just didn't have a good season. Yeah. But KP's going to turn it around. And he was a big, cheerleader for Kenny Payne and that. And that was something that actually kind of surprised me, because if you've heard from, Ellis or whoever, some of them may have not had said the nicest of things, where Sydney Curry just gave glowing reviews of Kenny Payne. The only thing, the strength and conditioning thing, he said there was a difference. But Kenny Payne as a coach and as a man, he loved him.
Was there Trentyn Flowers even did too?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Was there anything in particular that he kind of? I know it was a rough time to be discussing probably one of the biggest negatives you could in the area, but was there anything that he kind of glowed on with Kenny Payne in particular, or the new regime, just simply with the current unit now moving forward?
I didn't really ask him a ton about the new team because I know he's on another team.
Sure.
So I didn't really I just wanted to focus on his team and him. Yeah. So I was just like, yo, what's going on with you? How were you in the team? What was it like? You know? And he was like, yo, it was rough. There were some dark days. When you go 4-28 at a program like Louisville, you're gonna, and he said the fans were not nice to him. They weren't nice to the team, and so that was tough for him at times last year. But he, like I said, even through all of that, he gave glowing reviews and glowing praise of KP and the staff. He said, "Yo, y'all got some legends over there." He's named them. Nolan, Danny, and KP are guys that he really, really bigged up, and sounds like he still really, really has an affinity for, even after moving on.
All right. Before we get out of here, where can we find you? Plug yourself.
Yeah, Jeff Lightsey Jr. on all social media platforms at JLightsey7 and 35KY Sports. You can find that on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. We're everywhere, man. So we got clips going crazy right now just because of Trentyn Flowers. Thank you, Trentyn. You helped me out a lot, man. Right. So yeah, we can find us everywhere. And who knows what we'll have next? We, like in the last few days, we've had Griff, Sydney Curry, and now Trentyn Flowers. So who knows what'll happen next? You just got to stay tuned to find out.
Well, you're doing a great job. We appreciate you spending time with us. And the best part about all this, too, is you get the chance to, kind of get yourself out there even more than you already are, and you're doing a great job. And we're just thankful to have you on the first time of what will be probably multiple times.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, guys, man. Back in the old stomping grounds a little bit. It brings back some memories. Changed a lot. It's up, got some upgrades. This guy looks a lot different, too. He's
getting old. That's the only thing that's different.
His birthday was this past week.
Yeah, he's getting up there.
Yeah, I am getting up there. Thanks for reminding me. Jeff, thanks again for joining us. And one day, hopefully when you come back, we'll have an open
That would be so nice, and maybe even a background too.
Yeah,
That'd be
it'd
really
be
cool.
nice.
So I'm hoping it for you. Let's make it happen, Wave 3.
Let's make it happen. All right, well, of course, we had a blast here. Of course, so proud of Jeff. He interned under us, and this one can walk on 2 legs now. So it's awesome.
I'm standing on one right now. It's kind of cool,
right? Proud of you. Progress.
It's 10 weeks. 10 weeks. Shout out to Pro Rehab for helping me out on that.
Together.
They did.
Oh yeah, we are sponsored by Beer Nose.
We are. Hey, I'm gonna go stand on 2 legs and walk over to Beer Nose right now. Get that cauliflower pizza.
All right, so Dusty and I should be back tomorrow.
Yeah.
Probably going to be a show on Friday with the first installment of Touchdown Friday Night.
Yeah.
Probably not going to see us on Fridays for about 4 months.
You can see us at 11 o'clock though on
Right.
Friday nights.
But yeah, make sure you tune in. Touchdown Friday Night. We got cast of characters helping us out.
You guys got a game of the week this week?
Our game of the week would be Christian Academy hosting Owensboro.
Okay.
And
Should be a good one.
and of course, Manual and Central will
I
be
think
a
I'm going
huge
to go to that
game.
one. I'm going
There
to
you are.
go see Cortez Stone. He's
Yeah.
a beast.
Was just out at practice yesterday. Cortez is not playing defense this year.
Okay, I saw your thing. So yeah, I did.
Last year he played on both sides of the ball. This year he's that's amazing. He played on both sides of the ball and still rushed for over 2,200 yards.
That's ridiculous.
So I mean, it's a big weekend coming up. Our first Touchdown Friday night of the season. So you hope you'll join us, and we will see you all tomorrow.
Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you, Jeff.
It's no problem, man. No problem.